Hey, what's up, guys? This is Benny Ricciardi with rotocurve.com, and I'm here with our DraftKings and FanDuel MLB video for Thursday, July 21st. It's a small 7-game slate for the 7 o'clock slate tonight, and that's the one we're going to be concentrating on. So, as always, like we like to do here in the Benny's Bat section, we're going to take a look at each pitcher that's on the mound. We're going to try to figure out what their weaknesses are, and then which bats are going to profile to do the best against them. So we're going to start right up at the top with Miami against Philly. Jared Eichhoff is pitching for Philadelphia today. Left-handed bats hitting 267 against him in the last 2 years. Right-handed bats are around 250 in 2016, so they're doing okay against them this year as well. You really want to try to look at the lefties. So a guy like Christian Yelich makes a lot of sense, 372 WOBA, 158 ISO. More of a cash game play for me. He doesn't really have stolen base upside, doesn't really hit a lot of home runs, so you don't usually get big numbers out of him. But he is a guy that can get you a couple hits and, give you a solid score where he's cheap. Derek Dietrich is in a little bit of a slump. They dropped him down in the order, but he's another guy that hits right-handed pitching really well. 365 WOBA, 182 ISO for him since the start of last season. Like I said, I haven't been using him as much lately. He's kind of been on a little bit of a cold streak, but he is somebody who profiles well against a weak right-handed pitcher. And they're getting a good park bump because they're moving from Miami up to Philadelphia, which is a good hitter's ballpark. I also think that puts Giancarlo Stanton in play. 355 WOBA against righties, so respectable. But he's got a big 255 ISO score, and we know that this guy's got a ton of power. If you watch the, home run derby, if you watched him in those games against the Mets the week before where he hit 4 home runs and like 6 at-bats, this is a guy that can always go yard. Again, good park bump as they switch from Miami to Philly, so I think Stanton is somebody that could be a sneaky play as well. On the other side of this game, you got Tom Kohler for Miami, and Kohler's not all that great, but you usually want to attack him with left-handed bats. So, 296 left-handed bats are hitting against him this year. They do have a low home run rate, though. He doesn't give up a lot of home runs. I think he's only given up 5 total home runs in 100 innings pitched this year. So I wouldn't expect to see too many guys take Kohler yard here. The one guy that I do kind of like a little bit, Odubel Herrera leading off. 350 WOBA for him. He has stolen base upside. He does have the pop that he can go and hit a home run, although I doubt we see any home runs today or more than one against Kohler. But I think Odubel's probably my favorite play and likely the only Philly guy I think I'll even have any exposure to. Next game, Milwaukee at Pittsburgh. This one's a little bit better for bats. You got Francisco Liriano pitching for Pittsburgh. He is better at home this year. Right-handed bats are hitting 270 against him with 11 home runs and 74 at-bats. I always love this Milwaukee lineup against left-handed pitching. I know I talked about it yesterday, and they came through for us. They've been able to win us money because they usually go pretty low-owned, and this team definitely hits left-handed pitching well. You look at a guy like Ryan Braun, who's the best bat against lefties, 413 WOBA, 234 ISO for him. Jonathan Villar leading off, 370 WOBA for him. Was expensive yesterday, but still put up some big numbers. And then you got guys like, Jonathan Lucroy hitting cleanup, right-handed bat that hits lefties well. Chris Carter in the 5 spot, another right-handed bat that has big power upside against the lefty. And then even Hernan Perez, who slipped into that 2-hole against left-handed pitching, the spot that used to be, populated by Aaron Hill every time until they traded him away. Perez has been doing well since they moved him up into that 2-hole against lefties. He's been getting some good numbers for us, and he's pretty cheap. So I think you can look at any of those 5 guys up at the top of that order. Those 5 right-handed bats against Liriano, I think, are going to do some damage again today. On the other side of this game, I like the bats as well. You got Matt Garza pitching. He's given up 4 or more runs in his in only about 6 innings in his last 4 starts. So I definitely think Pittsburgh's going to be able to get some runs. Both left and right-handed bats the last 2 years are hitting between 290 and 300 against them. So I don't think you got to really discriminate. I mean, a guy like Gregory Polanco and Jaso, the lefties at the top of the order, are interesting. I think McCutcheon's interesting. I think Marte's interesting. You got a guy like Jung Ho Kang is interesting. You even got David Freese has been hitting well lately. Francisco Cervelli's back. So this lineup is getting healthy again. And remember, at the beginning of the year when this lineup was healthy, they were pounding out some runs. So I don't mind the Pittsburgh side of it either. It's a lot tougher to figure out which guys you want to stack up, though. I'd probably look at the outfielders, Kutch, Marte, Polanco. I think those guys are in play. You can go with Jaso if you want. I prefer Kang because he's got the home run power. But, either way, I think some of these bats are definitely in play. Next game, we can talk about Minnesota at Boston. And this is a tough one for me, man. I don't ever play Stephen Wright all that much. I mean, definitely not as much as I probably should have earlier in the season. he had a great start to the season, but he's actually struggled in his last four. His last four starts, he hasn't gone past 6 innings. He's given up 3 runs or more in each one of those starts. So I'm not really sure which way to go with this. Wright has been good this year. Everybody's been calling for the regression, and lately we've kind of seen a little bit of it. So I do think Minnesota can get some runs, but I don't think they're going to put up a huge number against them. Brian Dozier, 2 of 6 against them lifetime. Miguel Sano hits right-handed pitching well, so I think he could be somebody that could do well against the knuckleball. Eduardo Nunez isn't horrible against the knuckleball, but like I said, none of these guys are really giving me a lot of confidence. I don't think they're going to put up a huge number and really go for big upside. The other side of this game, though, we got Tyler Duffy on the mound. Left-handed bats hitting 260 against him with 4 home runs in 43 innings pitched. Right-handed bats are actually hitting 300 against him with 10 home runs in 43 innings. Anytime a righty's on the mound, you always got to like David Ortiz. 436 WOBA, 351 ISO score. The guy's 40 years old, and he's one of the best hitters in baseball right now. Go figure. Some of the righties I really like. I like a lot of the guys on this Boston team. I think almost anybody can be owned here. You got Betts, 360 WOBA in righty on righty matchups. Has some home run pop. I think he could take Duffy yard. Bogarts was 3 for 3 against them last game with the home run. Pedroia was 2 for 3 against them last game. You got Hanley Ramirez, you got Sandy Leon, you got Jackie Bradley Jr., you got Travis Shaw. All 8 of those guys to me are in play here against Duffy, who's not a very good pitcher. So I think really the way you want to do it, Boston's going to be the chalk. So if you want to play Boston guys, I think the thing that you have to do is what people did last night. Like instead of playing Ortiz, play Hanley. Maybe throw in a Travis Shaw, or throw in a Jackie Bradley Jr., or, Sandy Leon at catcher, who's been absolutely on fire, hitting like 450 over the last month. Throw in some of these guys at the bottom of the order. You're going to get them. I still think they're going to be owned, but you're going to get those guys closer to 10% ownership, whereas some of the guys towards the top of the order are probably going to be 25 to 35% owned today. And I think that's the way that you kind of get your differentiation. So if you want to stack up Red Sox, I'm not going to argue against it. But I don't think you should do the typical top 4 or 5 hitter stack that most people do. Try to do something a little different, because you're not going to be alone if you just take the top 4 guys in the order and stack them up today. Next game we could talk about, we got San Diego going up against St. Louis. You got Adam Wainwright on the mound for St. Louis. Very good turnaround for him after a rough start, after, basically missing almost all of last season. In his last 3 starts, he's only given up 1 run. I think in his last 6 starts, he's only had 2 bad ones, and the other 4 have all been pretty dominant. He looks like that dominant guy again. He's got the curveball working. He's throwing strikes, getting deep into games, 6-7 innings, and, striking out about, 1 guy per inning, and keeping the whip low and only giving up a couple runs. He's a viable option that I think we can use tonight. San Diego is not good against right-handed pitching, so the matchup for him is pretty good. If you're going to take anybody against him, you probably want to look at these left-handed bats. Travis Jankowski leading off. It's not that I love him. I don't love his bat, but if he gets on base, he always steals. So if he gets on, he steals, he scores a run. He basically makes value for you in 1 at bat. That's really what you're looking for if you're rostering a guy like Jankowski. You also got Ryan Shrimp, who's somebody I think we got to talk about. Young kid that they brought up, left-handed hitter, has been pounding the ball lately, hitting a whole bunch of home runs. He's a cheap option that a lot of savvy DFS players have been using in their rosters. So, he's somebody that I think you might want to consider. I don't think this is the perfect matchup for him, but again, he's been doing well against right-handed pitching, so he makes some sense. And then the other guy is Solarte, switch hitter, batting from the left side here today. He's another guy that I think we can look at. On the other side of this game is Andrew Kashner. Normally, left-handed bats are the way to light him up, but in 2016, right-handed bats are actually hitting 305 against them too, with 6 home runs in 29 innings. He has a huge fly ball rate to right-handed bats this year as well. You're looking at this team right now. The guy that stands out the most to me is Randall Gierchuk. I don't know if they're going to have him leading off again, but he's back up towards the top part of that order. 367 WOBA, huge 273 ISO since last season against right-handed pitching. He has the power upside. He can pound out some hits, and I think he actually matches up well here with Kashner. You can look at the lefties. You might have Matt Adams probably playing first base, hitting around the 5 spot there. If you get Greg Garcia leading off today, I think he's a viable option we can look at. If you want to look at the other right-handed bats, guys like Molina, Piscotty, Holiday probably round out the top part of the order. I don't really think that Kashner is all that good of a pitcher, so I would have no problem rolling some St. Louis bats out against him. But Gierchuk is far and away my favorite one of them, especially if he's going to be leading off today. Next game, we can talk about Detroit at Chicago White Sox. We got a couple good games coming up here for bats. Pelfrey's on the mound for Detroit. Left and right-handed bats are both hitting over 300 against him, but he does have a high fly ball rate and a low home run allowed rate. So I don't really see the White Sox pounding a lot of home runs out against him today, but they could pound out a bunch of hits, which means a guy like Adam Eaton is in play. Left-handed bat, hits really well. Maybe Tim Anderson leading off, or actually Eaton's been leading off. Anderson's been hitting in the 2 spot behind him. So I like both of those guys. I think they can get us some hits today, get on base, steal some bases, score some runs, cause some havoc that way. And then you got to look at the guys behind him that could drive him in. Abreu, very good in righty on righty matchups. That's kind of where he's made his bread and butter. So he could be somebody that could get some hits for us today, drive in some runs. Melky Cabrera has been really hot. He's batting cleanup right now for the Chicago White Sox team. The White Sox offense isn't all that great, but Pelfrey is a bad pitcher, so I could see them putting up some runs today. The other side of this game, we got James Shields. Now, a month ago, James Shields was probably the worst pitcher in baseball. He had like 3 games in a row where he put up like negative points on DraftKings and FanDuel, was just getting absolutely lit up. His Ks are down, but he's actually had 4 straight quality starts with like 2 runs or less allowed and, giving up like a little over a hit per inning. Left-handed bats normally the way to go after him in the past, but right-handed bats have been hitting him hard too in 2016. And the thing is, Shields has a big fly ball rate, so I think we could see some home runs here. Victor Martinez has been okay against him lifetime, but he's probably the best left-handed bat that they have on that Detroit team. He's 13 of 47 lifetime against Shields, 276 average with the home run, so I think he's somebody that I want to at least take a little bit of a look at. I actually like Miguel Cabrera a little better, 20 of 57 lifetime against Shields with 2 home runs. So he's hitting about 350 against them with a couple home runs. Obviously that's a pretty good number, pretty good stat line right there. And then even Cameron Maven is 5 of 12 lifetime. So the guys up there towards the top of the order, the V-Marks, the Miggies, the Mavens, those are the 3 guys that I'm really looking at on Detroit. The other guys haven't hit Shields all that well, although this Shields is not as good as the Shields that they might have seen a couple years ago in Kansas City. But still, I'm sticking by my V-Mark, Miggy, and Maven being the 3 guys I want to put in my lineup. The next game, another one that should have a lot of bats in it, Atlanta against Colorado. You got Mike Foltynewicz on the mound. Left-handed bats absolutely kill him. This year, they're hitting like 260, 270. Last year, they hit over 300 against them. So I think Cargo's in a great spot here. 409 WOBA, 288 ISO for him. Huge total in this game. I definitely think that we're going to get some runs scored at this Colorado team. Charlie Blackmon leading off, 365 WOBA, 184 ISO score. Nolan Arenado, 383 WOBA, 301 ISO score. Very good in righty on righty matchups. So I think all those guys on the Rockies make a lot of sense to use. The big bats, the guys you got to pay up for, but I think it's going to be worth it today. They do have the highest team total. I think them and Boston are the 2 highest team totals today. So I think you're going to see a lot of ownership on those teams, but I also think it's a good chance that these teams put up some good runs today. The other side of this game, we got Chad Bettis. Definitely been worse at home. His ERA is over 6, batting average allowed 333 at home, so he's definitely been getting knocked around. Both right and left-handed bats this year are hitting over 290, over 300 against them. He's basically just been getting knocked around, so you can look at anybody. Now, I know Atlanta isn't a team that pops off the page, but they've actually been hitting right-handed pitching a lot better lately, and there's a lot of left-handed bats in this order that I think makes some sense. And the reason why I kind of like them today, for a team that's the home team, the road team in Coors Field, with a guaranteed 27 outs, probably 4, maybe 5 at-bats for everybody on the team, they're very cheap. I mean, I think everybody on the team is below like 3,200 over on FanDuel, which you never, ever see for a team that's playing in Coors Field. And even on DraftKings, you'd have to pay up for Freeman, who's the best bat there, 370 WOBA, 236 ISO. That makes a little bit of sense. Inciarte's a little expensive on DraftKings. I think he's like 4,700. But you look at the other lefties, guys like Markakis, Perzinski, Jace Peterson, all these guys are dirt cheap for a team that's playing in Coors. Guys that are batting in the top 5 of the order up in Coors usually are like a minimum of 46, 4,700. You're getting some of these guys for below 4K. So, like I said, if you think that the run total, I mean, Atlanta, even though Atlanta's the underdog here, I mean, their implied run total is still over 5 as well. So they're, maybe the 3rd or 4th highest projected total on the day. So like I said, if you can get these guys cheap, you can round out the roster with a couple studs and some high-end pitching. I don't think that's the worst idea ever. So, keep those Atlanta bats in mind, even though Colorado is probably going to win this game and should put up a bigger number. Last game on the day, Tampa Bay at Oakland. You got Matt Moore on the mound for Tampa Bay. Now, right-handed bats are hitting 261 against them this year. They have 16 home runs in 89 innings worth of work, which is, about one every 5.5 innings. The two guys that stand out the most on Oakland to me, Danny Valencia has made a living off of crushing left-handed pitching. 387 WOBA, 199 ISO since the start of 2015. Definitely somebody I would think I'm going to have in some of my lineups. Very cheap on FanDuel. I think he's like 2,800 on FanDuel, which is just really, really cheap for a guy in this good of a matchup. Marcus Semien is a little more expensive on both of the sites, but he's another guy that's just been crushing left-handed pitching lately. And not just lately. I mean, he's always crushed left-handed pitching. He profiles well against lefties. 389 WOBA, 247 ISO since the start of last year. Has had some big home runs against lefties. And they usually move him up in the order. So if we see him batting in like the 2-hole tonight with the lefty starting, I think Semien is definitely somebody you want to look at. The other side of this game, we got Sonny Gray. Gray is tough, man. His K rate is down this year. He hasn't been getting a lot of strikeouts, which is tough for you to take him because if he does give up a run or two, guys that get you 9 or 10 strikeouts, if they give up 2 or 3 runs, the strikeouts basically cancel out those runs. So they're still going to get you a pretty big number. If Gray gives up 2 or 3 runs with him only getting 2 or 3 strikeouts, it's just going to absolutely murder his fantasy score. So he has been better. He's given up 2 runs or less in 6 of his last 8 games. But if you look at the fantasy scores that he's gotten you in those games, it doesn't justify ever paying up for this guy. His price is a little bit elevated today, so I just don't think I can do it. In 2016, both lefties and righties are hitting 270 against him. So he's definitely a lot worse this year than he was last year. Last year, everybody was under like 225 against him. I think righties hit 225 and lefties hit like 210 against him or something like that. So like I said, he has been getting hit around a little more this year. Now, you take a look at that Tampa Bay team, though. Tampa Bay does not hit right-handed pitching extremely well. The guys that they have, the Forsyths, the Geyers, the Longorias, these guys are all solid bats, but they're much better against left-handed pitching. Against righties, you want to look at some of the lefties that they have on their team. Corey Dickerson, probably the best one. He's basically had really good numbers coming in the year because he played at Coors Field, has had an up and down year, went back to Coors last week and just absolutely dominated again. So I think his ownership's going to be pretty high. But again, outside of Coors Field, we haven't seen much out of this guy this year. He's basically a boom or bust home run type. He can hit you a home run and that'll be good. But if he doesn't hit you the home run, there's been games where he really hasn't done anything for you. Some of the other guys, I guess the lefties, I mean, you want to look at Brad Miller if he's up there. Not somebody that really excites me. Logan Morrison does have a little bit of home run power, but again, not somebody who really, really excites me. Oakland's not a good hitter's ballpark, and it's not like Sonny Gray's been getting lit up lately. Like I said, in 6 of his last 8 starts, he's given up 2 runs or less. So I think I'm just staying away from Tampa Bay bats today. I think that's probably the best thing to do. So that wraps it up for the 7-game slate that we have here for MLB DFS on Thursday night. Thank you guys for joining us here at rotocurve.com. And as always, stay classy, DFS.